Good morning. I hope everyone had a wonderful night's sleep. And if you didn't, stay tuned because I've got some tips for you and some insights to help you get better rest. Let's get started. So, we're talking about sleep. And as autistics, we don't always get the best sleep. There's so many factors and so many different things involved in why we don't. So, let's dive in first and let's talk about what is your sleep data telling you? So on Move Monday, I asked you to go ahead and start noticing and recording, collecting the data because we are our best researchers in our own lives. Put on your lab coat and start to observe your sleep cycle and your sleep patterns this week. What have you found so far? So, what is your sleep data telling you in the fact that how much sleep do you get on average each night? You should be getting between 7 and 9 hours. That's the average. I know that everyone varies, and in different stages of my life, different ages, I required more sleep or less sleep. So don't hold hard and true to just saying, oh, I've got to get 8 hours of sleep. Really find out, do I really need 9? Do I need 10 or 12? Because each stage of life requires a different amount of sleep. The other question to ask in this is, how long does it take for you to fall asleep? And a lot of that has to do with what your sleep hygiene and your sleep routines are. The brain loves to know when things are going to happen, and it loves consistency, predictability. Because when the brain can say, and like in trust, because we have to build trust with ourselves, we have to have that integrity with ourselves, with our body and our brain. And it's my brain knows and can trust that each night I'm going to make sure that my body and my brain are getting the rest that it needs. And your brain and your body like to know when something is going to happen, and they like to be consistent. They like it to be, the brain likes things to be predictable. So have a set schedule, have a specific routine, and that time that it takes for you to fall asleep will get much shorter the more consistent and predictable you are with your sleep routine. So do you stay asleep or do you wake up throughout the night? If you wake up throughout the night, how many times throughout the night are you waking up? This is a really good one to note because, and we're going to get into this, the 4 stages of the sleep cycle as to why that could be interrupting your deep sleep and really causing you to wake up feeling awful. Last week, we talked about everything morning routine, how you feel, start noticing things. That's because it also works with, in tandem, your sleep cycle. Now, how do you feel when you wake up? And if you can look at your sleep data and go, okay, last night I only woke up one time to go to the bathroom. So that might be an indicator that maybe you need to stop drinking liquids a couple hours before you start your sleep routine to make sure that the bladder isn't expanding throughout the night, and then you're having to wake up and go to the bathroom. Now, interesting little fact here. The human bladder is made out of transitional epithelial cells. They're really cool because the cells that make up the bladder actually change shape and expand, unlike any other part of your body. Just a little fun fact. So if we know what our sleep data is and kind of look at what it's telling us about our sleep cycle, like if it takes us forever to fall asleep, if we're waking up lots of times throughout the night, are you waking up and you're sweating and you're hot? And that's one of the things that wake you up. That is one of mine sometimes. And I have to make sure that my room is really cool, that the blankets are just so, and we're going to get into some of that in just a minute. So why do we sleep? That is, what's the whole point of this? Why do we sleep in the first place? The brain stores new information and it gets rid of toxic waste during sleep. Like that is a huge one. That's one that I really didn't think about. Have you ever thought about it? That your brain stores toxic waste during the day, and at night, your sleep cycle is actually sort of, the cleaning crew that comes in. Think about sleep as your cleaning crew. That's kind of how I think about it. Um, your nerve cells communicate and reorganize during sleep. So this is where long-term memories are formed. And I know a lot of us, we have short-term memory challenges and we have long-term memory challenges. Sleep is a huge factor in our memory and how our brain is storing the things that have happened during the day, short-term, and turning them and converting them into long-term memories. Body cells repair. It restores energy. It replaces and releases hormones. Emotional well-being is a big part of sleep. That happens in the amygdala. Weight management. This is a tremendous one as well. It's something that I struggle with, and it's sleep when I'm not getting it. And I look back over time and it's like, when I was at my heaviest, I was not sleeping well at all. Here's some interesting stuff. So you have ghrelin, which is the hormone that increases appetite. See, things like this happen during sleep. And leptin, which is the hormone and the indicator that sends that signal to your brain to say, hey, you're full, you're satiated, you can stop eating now. When you don't have enough sleep, those two are completely out of whack. Your ghrelin elevates, making you hungrier, and your leptin decreases, making it harder for you to identify that you're full. And if you're like me and you have alexithymia, that's already a challenge, right? It's already hard to kind of figure out when you're hungry and when you're full, when you're satiated. So not getting that additional sleep really makes that tough. And when you've got the chronic munchies, sometimes that's an indicator that your hormones are also out of balance because you're not getting enough sleep and it's not giving you the right signals. Just some good insight on that one, right? So when we're talking about emotional well-being, this is a really big one. When we've had enough sleep, we can be more adaptive. Our amygdala is more adaptive. It is less reactionary. When you haven't had enough sleep, have you noticed that you're less tolerant of people and situations, and just your sensory sensitivities are super heightened, really the slightest thing can just drive you bananas. This happens for me. I know it happens for you too. Sleep is a really big part of that. And that's one of the other big reasons for why we get sleep. So let's talk about the 4 stages of sleep. This was really interesting because when you know how sleep works and the cycles of sleep, it really helps you understand better, when you're looking at your sleep data, especially if you're waking up throughout the night to go to the bathroom because you're hot. But for me, the sheets, it will wake me up if there is a crease in the sheet and it gets underneath my legs or underneath my hips. I will wake up in burning, searing pain. And it's just small things like that that disrupt your sleep cycle. So here are the 4 stages of sleep. They each occur in about 70 to 120 minute cycles, and they happen about 4 times throughout the night in this 4 cycles repeat, okay? And it happens between, 7 and 9 hours of sleep on average. So stage 1 is the non-REM sleep, and REM stands for rapid eye movement. That is the 4th stage of deep sleep, when your eyes actually, you see people's eyes going back and forth like they're watching a tennis match really fast. So in stage 1, that's non-REM sleep. So that's usually about 7 minutes. That's all it lasts, 7 minutes. And that's usually, that is the first stage you experience when you first start to fall asleep. So what happens in the body is the brain waves, eye movement, and the heart rate slow down. In stage 2, in the non-REM sleep, that's your light sleep. That's just before deep sleep. Your body temperature decreases, your eye movements stop, Your heart rate and your muscles continue to relax further. Interesting part about stage 2 is your brain waves spike, then they slow down. So there's like this peak and this drop. It's kind of like your brain is going, okay, wow, okay, we're in sleep. We're gonna get this rest. Okay, I gotta send out all the signals to let everybody know, hey, join the party. We're getting ready to sleep and we got some work to do. And then they drop back down. During the sleep, during your sleep cycle throughout the night, this is where you spend most of your time throughout the sleep cycle that you repeat about 4 times throughout the night. Sleep stage 2 is where you spend most of the time, which was really interesting to know, right? Just to kind of have this insight really helps sort of evaluate and helps you figure out where you can start targeting certain things in your sleep routine. And I'll tie this together in just a second. So in stage 3, which is also non-REM sleep. So the first 3 is non-rapid eye movement sleep, okay? So in stage 3, this is where deep sleep begins. Your eyes and your muscles do not move in this stage. There's a part of your brain that actually sends out signals and you are paralyzed. Your body does not move. If you've ever had those weird sort of lucid waking up stages in your sleep where you're like, oh my God, I can't move, I'm paralyzed. Sometimes it's sort of in this part where your sleep gets disrupted that you wake up and your brain hasn't quite given you the signal to start moving again. Also, brain waves that continue to slow down. Your deep sleep is incredibly restorative. This is what you need to feel refreshed the next morning. So this is what, if you're falling asleep and you're not staying asleep, and you're not getting through these cycles long enough, it's really good to start noting in your sleep data that you're collecting on yourself. Have that little pen and paper next to your bed and jot down what time it is and kind of when you know you get in bed to start feeling sleepy and fall asleep, when are you waking up? Because if you know how these cycles run, like your first 7 minutes is sort of stage 1, you're falling asleep. It's that light sleep. Stage 2, you're getting into, it's light sleep. You stay there a little bit longer than the rest of the time. So that's somewhere, between an hour to maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours. And if you're waking up before you get into that stage 3, when you lay back down, you kind of start the process over again. And you might be spending more time in stage 2 and really not getting any stage 3 and 4 deep sleep. So that's why it's really good to note when you're waking up and when you're falling asleep. So you can kind of pattern these stages to know how much deep sleep you're getting. So as you move through stage 2, and this is where you spend most of your time, you move into stage 3, which is your deep sleep. That's where it starts to begin. This is also where you're going to then shift into that next level, which is your rapid eye movement. This is your deepest level of sleep. This usually happens about 90 minutes after you fall asleep. So that's an hour and a half on average. That's if you go through the first, 3 stages pretty easily, right? So it's usually around 90 minutes after you fall asleep. Your eyes move quickly. The brain waves increase. Your heart rate and your breathing speed up here as well. So that's helping bring lots of oxygenation to your cells. If your heart rate is pumping more and you're breathing faster, you're breathing more, that's taking in the oxygen, that's fueling those cells, and that's sending out and getting everything moving in your body for that restorative sleep, because there's a lot of things that happen in our body during sleep, like cellular restoration and repair and those toxins being flooded out. So just about every 90 minutes is when you hit this cycle. So if you look at your sleep data and you're noticing when you're waking up and when you're having to go to the bathroom, or you're hot or restless or anything like that, kind of map it out like in 90-minute segments to see where that deep sleep for you may fall and see if that's what's getting disrupted for you, because that's going to make a big difference. So let's talk about the sleep-wake cycle for a second, because this is a really important part. The sleep-wake cycle has 2 things. It has cortisol, which gets a really bad rap, by the way. People call it the stress hormone and it's just big nasty thing, but actually cortisol is really important. Cortisol has its own curve, has its own cycle. So cortisol, when you wake up in the morning, is at its highest peak. That's so you can be your most alert, your most refreshed, and your most energized. It's not a bad thing. So it's up here, and throughout the day, it slowly decreases. It's kind of like this. It's up here, and it slowly dips down right here. We want it to do that. That is a healthy cortisol curve. That's a healthy cortisol cycle. The reason is on one end, you've got cortisol, and that's your awake and alert. And yes, it's called the stress hormone because it also gives you those fight or flight feelings, but it also gives you that focus. It gives you that alertness, which you need in the mornings. And all of this is restored and put into balance at night. So on the opposite end, when your cortisol curve is dipping and getting low, that starts to signal the brain to release melatonin, which allows you to get sleepy and move into your sleep routine and your sleep cycle. Yes, there's circadian rhythms and there's all different kinds of things that we talk about in cycles for the human body. But cortisol melatonin is that sleep wake cycle that's really important. And those things are restored and balanced, not just through sleep, but through diet, exercise, and, some of those things that we're not always paying attention to. So did you know that we spend a third of our time asleep? 7 to 9 hours every night. So that brings to mind the question of, do we really value sleep? Do we really value sleep? If our body requires and our brain requires a third of our time to sleep, to get all the benefits and everything that deep sleep gives us, do we really value it? So here are some things to think about. Deep sleep gives you these benefits. Your memories are consolidated. All those little sorting things that happen in your brain. Learning and emotions are processed. Physical recovery occurs. Blood sugar levels and your metabolism are balanced. Your immune system is energized, helping you fight off those nasty bugs. And the brain detoxifies. Now, here's something interesting about how that works, the detoxification in the brain. When you are asleep and you're moving into those deep sleep cycles, signals are sent out to reduce inflammation in your brain and your body. And there's this wonderful fluid in the cerebral spinal fluid in the column there that comes in and it basically washes. It's kind of cool, washes your brain and washes out all the toxins that have built up in your brain over the day. But it doesn't occur if the inflammation doesn't decrease. So that's one of the things that was really interesting to me because I have some health issues, maybe you do too, where chronic inflammation, my inflammation markers are really elevated. So over the last 5 years, I've done a lot of work in my diet, in my exercise, because those things, what you eat, because that's fueling your cells. And there's foods that are anti-inflammatory that really help with that, especially in your gut balance, because, that's your second brain. And when all of those things get into balance a little bit better and you can reduce the overall inflammation that you experience, the detoxification, that brainwashing happens much more effectively. I noticed that I used to have really horrible brain fog. And maybe you guys experience that too, really horrible brain fog. And in that brain fog, it was a lot of it, I think, attributed to my chronic inflammation. So when I was bringing my inflammation markers down, I started to notice that my sleep was getting better. And I think because I was getting better sleep, it was also allowing that brainwashing to happen, to detoxifying. And I love it, kind of brainwashing. And it's so funny. Okay. So here are some tips that I want to share with you guys as we're wrapping up on how to get better deep sleep, because that deep sleep is really where all the magic happens. So First of all, establish sleep routines. Because remember, the brain doesn't necessarily want to know just what, it wants to know when. So pick a time that works for you and be consistent and be regular and routine about what you're doing. Um, that also includes making sure that you sort of have those steps in place that triggers your body and your brain to know, hey, we're moving into sleep. This is where we're going to wind down. We can relax. We can trust that our body is going to get that 1/3 of its time to sleep. One of those things can be just, if you take a warm bath, if you put away all of your technology, because this blue light, this blue screen, the light from the screens really does make a difference. It really does. And there's so much research into that I'm not even going to bore you with it. Um, One of the things that really helps is a sleep mask to block out any light, and earplugs, especially if you have a partner that snores or that talks in their sleep. Um, Having your room very cool. There are lots of studies that are showing that the cooler the room temperature, and that's usually in the lower 70s. Like for me, I really like it in the lower 60s. That's because my body tends to be hotter at night. I tend to get really warm. So think about that as well for yourself. What is the temperature in your room? How can you lower it? The other thing is your exercise. Exercise really, and especially because I'm also ADHD and I've got this like super high energy motor that's constantly, putting out energy. I have learned that the days that I do not exercise, that I don't get in at least 20 minutes of some vigorous exercise, I don't sleep as well. I don't burn off some of that energy. And it doesn't have to be really strenuous. I mean, you can just go for a walk that actually elevates your heart rate and gets you a little glistening. Only has to do it for like 20 minutes. But to do that, just that 20 minutes, investing that in yourself and doing it early enough in the day, because exercise does release those feel good endorphins, serotonin and things that make us feel really good and happy, which is why you want to try and do it earlier in the day. The other thing is meditation. Meditation is a really wonderful tool to use, especially incorporating as part of your sleep routine in the evenings, because mindfulness and meditation in particular, there's some incredible brain studies that show how people who meditate and practice mindfulness have much less reactive default brain networks. And that was pretty cool, because when you can lower that activity that's happening in your brain and slow things down, your brain can relax and take in, and it's less reactive and responsive to all those emotional and sensory stimulus that happen in our lives as autistics. So that's a really good practice to start looking into if you haven't already. And the other one is journaling. And that's one of the tips that I also shared this week in some of the posts. And I shared yesterday some links to help you get started if you aren't journaling or if you're looking to take your journaling to the next level. One of the biggest things that they found in journaling, even if you just do it 5 minutes as part of your preparing for sleep routine, it allows the brain to sort of get everything out. And when you write it down on paper, when you actually translate it from your brain and kind of release it, it helps your body and your brain relax, because it feels like things are getting organized and you're going to pay attention to them later. And the brain can like, okay, they've written it down. Now I don't have to try and remember it. And I can let that go and go work on the things that I need to do to restore, your body and your brain. I hope that this sleep segment has been helpful to you. I hope that finding out more about what sleep is, how the sleep cycles work, and being able to incorporate your sleep data, your sleep-wake cycle, and some tips to get better deep sleep have been helpful to you today. Take care, and I'll see you next week.